Hey, what's going on, folks? Just wanted to get another book review out there because people seem to like the last one that I did. The few people who actually watched it, but hey, you know what? You got to start somewhere, right? I'm going to try to do all of this in one shot instead of breaking it up into two, so it might end up being about 20 minutes or so. But let's go ahead and get started, I suppose. The book that I wanted to review today is called The Devil in the White City. The name of the guy who wrote this, his name is Erik Larson. Hey, cat. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? His name's Erik Larson. This is actually a non-fiction account of the World's Fair. I can't remember exactly what year it was in. I may not have all of the exact names and dates and all of that because it's been about 2 months since I've read this book, but I've been really excited about talking about it. So this book is called The Devil in the White City, as I said. Hey, thanks, cat. And what it's about, if you guys have ever seen a documentary about the fella or heard the name H.H. Holmes, he is one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, and some believe that he was America's first serial killer. But you know, over a period of time, a lot of stuff gets lost in translation, and certainly somebody's murdered more people than that. But this was a bad dude. This book right here is broken up into two different sections. Some of it is based after a guy named Daniel Burnham and one of his colleagues. And this all happens, the whole book is based in Chicago. And it's during the World's Fair of 1890, I want to say 1892, 1893. And the story is broken up into two different parts. And half of it is about this fella named Daniel Burnham, and then the other half is about H.H. Holmes. Now, the part with Daniel Burnham, he was a renowned architect in Chicago, and he built a lot of famous buildings and stuff, oversaw a lot of the famous buildings that were going up in Chicago. Chicago was a booming city back then. It was a city, like, lots of people going in, lots of people going out, and, you know, a lot of stuff happened there. It was a huge crime spot and all of that. The police usually had their hands tied with other crimes. People went missing all the time, and it was, to a lot of people, a hellhole. But this guy, his name's Daniel Burnham, the reason why he's important is because he was the one who oversaw the building or the preparation of the World's Fair. Now, the World's Fair, if you don't already know, is a fair that basically encapsulates all of the modern technology and all of the how do you say, not just modern technology, but just like different things. Like this particular year, of the World's Fair, they built the very first Ferris wheel. They introduced certain kinds of lights or something like that, different kinds of light bulbs or something like that. I think somewhere I read that they introduced like frosted mini wheats or something like that, or like shredded wheat they call it. So, you know, there and this particular World's Fair was being done on the heels of the previous World's Fair, because I think they did it like every 4 years or so, or every so many years. And they did this World's Fair on the heels of one in Paris that they had just done a few years prior in Paris, where they unveiled the Eiffel Tower. So basically it's like, holy crap, we have a lot to compete with. You know, it's tough to beat out, to do something more extravagant than the Eiffel Tower. And the Eiffel Tower, as y'all know, is still standing today. So the very first Ferris wheel that, I think the guy's name was like William Ferris or something like that. The very first one that they built, they ended up dynamiting for the metal, you know, sometime a few years after this World's Fair. And none of the buildings that they built during that time are still standing. But anyway, so you had all that going on. You had a lot of people going in and out of the city who were coming in because they were trying to find jobs, young women, young men, people looking for work because it was such a promising city for employment and stuff like that. And so, what am I saying? What am I saying right now? Well, this is all in one take, so if I screw up and I don't get something right, please forgive me, but I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm trying not to say like 100 times. So, I'll do the best I can. Okay, just forewarning you. So, anyway, there's a fella, his name was H.H. Holmes, but that wasn't his original name. His name was actually Herman Mudgett. And he was born in some town in New Hampshire, and so he was a young guy, as they say, a handsome young man. And when he was just like 18 years old, he met and married his first wife. And this was he was a very interesting character, to say the least. But he basically seduced this young girl. You know, she was younger than him, and he got her pregnant. So they got married, and so he didn't want to be tied down by any of that, as far as the book goes. So he started making himself more and more scarce, to the point where he just stopped going back at all. He fathered a child with her, but she was one of the lucky ones who he didn't murder. But we'll get into that. So we're moving forward, and he is set up shop in... The dog is barking. He's setting up shop in Chicago, and he is a very... I'm trying to think of the word, but he is a very outspoken, likable person. A lot of people thought favorably of him because he was just nice, he was well-spoken, educated, the whole nine, you know. And but with women, he was known for being unusually, like the kind of person who gets unusually close to you. Like they start talking to you or whatever, and then they're like holding your hand or something. He's like, blah, 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 you know, and just like schmoozing these women. Well, he faked his credentials, and he made himself a pharmacist. So everyone thought that he was a pharmacist. So he started working alongside this woman and her husband, who owned a pharmacy. So, and the husband was sick, and the husband and the husband ended up dying, and then the wife was there, and so they just kind of went about their business. And one day the woman just up and disappeared, and people who knew her and her husband and all of that, they were all like, well, where did Mrs. so-and-so, Miss Buttersworth, or whatever her name was, you know, it wasn't that, but they're like, where did she go? And he's like, oh, you know, she just, and he made up some excuse about how she went out of town and wasn't expected to come back. But, you know, as you later find out, well, you never do find out what happened to her, but by all the disappearances that happened because of this guy, one can assume that he murdered her. There were a lot of women who were infatuated with him. He was, I don't know why being, you know, weird and cozy and all that stuff was somehow, you know, like, I don't know why these women thought the way they did of him, but the local women just adored him, and they would go in there and they would just spend all their time and they just sit there like, and they would just like, worship this guy. And so after a while, you know, like, he would end up making one of them his so-called girlfriend or whatever, and she would stick around for a while, and then she would go missing, you know, or I'm gonna backtrack just a little bit, okay, because he was with the woman, okay, and then she got pregnant too, and so this guy, his name was Herman Mudgett. He changed his name to H.H. Holmes, okay? I don't know if he did it legally or not, but he changed his name. And he would like con these people and con those people. He had a lot of debts and stuff because he would order all kinds of furniture and all different kinds of stuff for the buildings. And then, you know, when people would come to collect on the debt, he would basically like schmooze them. He would like pour them expensive whiskey and give them cigars and stuff and get all chummy with them. And then the people would be like, okay, you know, you are a cool dude. So why don't you pay me next week or next month when you can get around to it, because I like you, dude. Cool. And then he'd be like, bye-bye. Have a nice day now. And so they would leave. And he basically had all these women around him. So, he met this one woman, okay? And he fathered a baby with her. And she started getting jealous and stuff of all the other women who were in the area. So he bought a house outside of, like, on the other side of town or something, and just basically dumped her there. And somewhere in the meantime, this is where everything starts getting really weird. Is because people started to become a problem for him. People started to suspect things or whatever. So what he did was he sold, either he sold or he burned it to the ground. I can't remember which. The building of the pharmacy building that he was in. Like, he basically convinced the woman whose husband died, he convinced her to basically sign the rights of that particular building over to him. He's like, well, I could take very good care of it for you if anything should ever happen. You know? And she was like, oh, you're so sweet. I would gladly sign the building over to you. What am I? I'm just an old woman. I'm just an old widow. You know? So she signed it over to him. And then shortly thereafter, the woman turns up missing. So anyway, he becomes a rather wealthy man. And it wasn't that he was unable to pay his debts. He was a very wealthy man, running this pharmacy. It wasn't that he wasn't unable to pay his debts. He just didn't want to. And he was like, go, screw you. I'm not doing it. And then when people would show up going, hey, I want my fucking money, he'd be like, all right, I'm sorry. Here's a little bit of money and a cigar. Why don't you have yourself a candy cane over there from the jar, and we'll be friends. And for whatever reason, people just liked him. So he ends up starting construction of, like, what I guess the best I can call a house of horrors. And he builds like this not a mansion, but it's like a hotel, I guess you could say. And it's the bottom floor is like a pharmacy / outlet store where, like, you could buy clothes and stuff, I think, or maybe even like get a shave or a haircut or something like that. And the upstairs was supposed to be like a hotel room, but everything was very weird about it, like hallways that led to nowhere, or trap doors, things like that. And while he was having this thing built, while he was having it built, he would be very specific about things. He'd be like, no, this needs to be this way, that needs to be that way. And when people who were building, he would nitpick at little things, and then he would single people out and say, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. Therefore, the people who built these trap doorways and all of these, things like spy doors and stuff where he could, like, watch people from inside the walls and stuff like that. When people... Well, he would be like, I'm not satisfied with this, and he would fire him, and he would never even pay him. And people were like, what the hell, blah, 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 but it didn't matter. He just, he was like, get out of here, get out of here. So the only person who really knew all of the secrets of this place was H.H. Holmes. Okay, so you had all of these people coming in and out of the city, and so therefore, if people turned up missing, chances are, you would never suspect that it was the so-called pharmacist, the nice guy, and so. Kind of lost my spot. He builds this thing, and one of his, there was a woman, and this was an extramarital affair. His second wife, he never even divorced his first wife, he just left. And then his second wife, he was still married to her. And then he was with this other woman who he was courting and stuff. And she got pregnant. And he was like, oh, this is a problem. So, and she was getting kind of naggy or whatever it might have been that started to, bug him about her. And he used chloroform on her. It was one of the things that he would do, is that he would use chloroform to knock people out, and then he would murder them, and then get rid of the body. But we'll get into that too. So this woman, she was pregnant, and he chloroform knocked her out because he convinced her that he was going to, do something, and then like, oh, we'll deliver the baby or something like this, or no. He convinced her to have an abortion, and he was going to knock her out and do the abortion on her. But instead of doing an abortion on her, even though she didn't want it, but he was like, but we'll be together forever if you let me do this. So she lets him knock her out, and he murders her. And he murdered her. So, one of the ways that he would go about doing what he was doing was a lot of the times he would pump gas. I can't remember what kind of gas it was that he liked to use, but he would like pump gas into the person's living quarters or something from a secret entranceway or something like that, where he'd like hook a hose up or something, and he would just gas them, you know. And another weird thing that happened that he used to do was, at the time, okay, now this guy was a real con artist, okay. Now the thing is at the time, okay, there was a real shortage of cadavers for scientific research, okay. So basically, if you showed up with a dead body, then a lot of the times there was somebody around who would take it off of your hands and pay you money and wouldn't ask any questions. So H.H. Holmes, he had a kind of a henchman, I guess you could say. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but Holmes had help, okay? And it was probably a guy, if I remember correctly, I think it was a guy, wasn't the smartest, you know, kind of guy, but I think he kind of like entrapped him somehow. If I remember correctly, it was kind of like one of those things where it's like, well, if I go down, you go down too, buddy. So you better do what I say, you know, type things. And I can't remember exactly what happened to him. I think he went down with Holmes when they finally caught up to him, and they caught him. But so basically what Holmes did to this girl who he had gotten pregnant was that he killed her, and then he had his friend pull the skin off from her face and did some different stuff to her to make her unrecognizable. And then he sold the corpse for money. And he did this a few times. He did this to a few different people that we know of, or that the book says. And it never quite gets into whether or not it was actually her, but one can assume that that's what happened. So anyway, the World Fair is going on, lots of people coming in and out, and Holmes is just having a blast because, you know, there's people, you know, he's got people coming in, and he's basically killing people at will, you know, and they're not sure exactly how many people he killed, but they think that it's somewhere between like the mid-20s to possibly even 200 people. There are some people who have a theory that he may actually be Jack the Ripper, but I don't sign on for that. I don't think that that's true, but they did happen around the same time, and Jack the Ripper, you know, when his murder spree stopped, it stopped abruptly. Now, you know, they say that, you know, serial killers, they don't usually stop. They keep on going usually until they get caught or something happens to them, like they die of a brain disease or something like that. But I mean, there are documentaries, or at least one documentary that I can think of, where they were doing the correlations between H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper. But so the World's Fair goes on, and it comes and goes, and then well, what happens? H.H. Holmes, okay, he ends up, people start getting suspicious. They're like, where's my daughter? Where's my daughter? She said that the last place that she was with you. I mean, there's a lot of backstory. I'm just giving you guys an over-the-top overview. I think you guys should read it yourself. I hope that I'm doing a good job. But the people started getting pissed. They're like, where's my daughter? Where's my daughter? Where's my daughter? So you know what he does? He sets fire. He eventually sets fire to his house of horrors. But before he did that, I left this part out. He basically had a crematorium built down in the lower basement of his building. And so the people that he killed, he could take them through the secret passages of his building, and he could take them down there, do whatever he wanted to them, and then burn them. Right? And all that's left is ash. Even the smell. He was even careful to make sure that the smell was contained within the crematory in the basement. So, after he burned the building, okay, he up and left. He moved to somewhere in Texas. I think maybe Dallas, maybe Austin, something like that. But he moved to Texas, and basically set up shop again, and then it gets a little foggy here for me exactly what happens, but what happens? But basically, at this point, a detective comes in, and the detective is starting to ask questions. He's like, he's connecting dots. He wants to, he's asking a lot of people questions. Who did you see with this person a lot? And all these different things. And H.H. Holmes, a.k.a. Herman Mudgett, started to come up a lot. And eventually, I don't know exactly how, I don't remember exactly how he was caught, except that he murdered 2 young children. I think one girl was 14 and another one was like 8. And he was something to do with their mother, and he was like basically playing a game of cat and mouse. Like, because this guy's MO was basically that he wanted you to fall in love with him. He wanted you to fall in love with him, and then he would kill you. And that's pretty messed up. It's like, he would make these women swoon. They're like, ah! And then he's like, and that's it. So this guy has definitely earned his place in the annals of psychotic murdering, killing people. What else? So basically, in the end, Mudgett was captured, and they went to a rental house that he had rented just briefly, and they found these 2 kids that were buried down in the basement, and it was all connected. And the mother of the kids was like, "Those are my kids," and that, they caught him. Okay, so he was imprisoned, and while he was in prison, he was still being like the same old, like, gregarious, like, noble sounding guy. Like, he even made the prison guards like him. The prison guards were like upset when he was put to death. They're like, God, what a shame that that they had to hang him, But, and the whole time, like, I think he wanted to be his own attorney or something, like when you defend yourself. So I think he did that. And you know, and they found him guilty, and they hung him. So, but this is this book, it goes into a lot of detail. Some of it is a little bit dry, you know, but the way that it's written and the way that that he words things, you know, just, you know, there's parts of it where you just sit back in your chair and you're like, whoa, like, wow, you know, like, and stuff that I can't even begin to remember. It's been a couple of months since I've seen it, or since I've read it. But I hope that this video was enjoyable for you guys. I hope that it kept your attention for long enough. I know it's half an hour long. Terribly sorry about that, but I did the best I can, and I tried to do it all in one shot without, you know, the fancy intro, or when, you know, where you can edit it here and, you know, paste them together so that, you know, you can cut out the parts that you don't like. You guys are getting the whole shebang. So hopefully all of this turned out well. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and if you guys do enjoy it, I have a couple other books that I would also like to talk to you about. But as it seems, the books that I've been reading lately are nonfiction. I kind of prefer nonfiction. I think that nonfiction is a bit stranger than fiction, because, you know, and there's always that, oh man, you know, this really happened. Now, I mean, it's all through the eyes of the writer, so, you know, you got to take it all with a grain of salt. But, you know, when you write nonfiction, you know, you're supposed to try to be as honest as possible. And this Erik Larson guy knocks it out of the park. I thought that it was such a good read. I don't want to hold you guys up too much longer, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And I hope that you guys keep on listening and keep on liking and sharing some of the stuff that I'm bringing to you, because I think it's fun, and I hope that you like to watch it. So take care. Adios.